Is there a more polarizing band in metal right now than Mötley Crüe? If you have heard of Mötley Crüe, right now you probably have an opinion on the crew. Chances are that opinion is different than the one you had 2 months ago, which would be a different opinion that you had 2 decades ago. And if you were around in the late 1900s, love saying that, doesn't that make us sound really old? Well, if you're like me and you heard Mötley Crüe in the 80s, the opinion you had back then may be different than all of the other opinions you have. Of course, that's just my opinion. There's a lot of negative opinions about the band Mötley Crüe right now, and much of that hate has some basis of fact. Or does it? I started as a fan, became a friend, then kind of got fucked over by someone in the band, and now I'm like, Nobody can deny Mötley Crüe is in trouble right now with the perception that the fans have. I mean, can they become that stadium-filling band again? Is it too late? On social media, I have not only stopped talking or posting hate, I delete and block negative comments even if I agree with them. I don't believe voicing your disdain for a certain band or album does much good when you make it personal. I mean, look at everybody taking to the internet to talk about the new Metallica album, which I find to be quite good. People love telling you what they don't like about it. How about just keeping that to yourself and posting what albums out there you do like? I think that might bring positivity back your way. The Cat House Hollywood podcast is supposed to be upbeat, maybe a little nostalgic, shocking. But when you leave the Cat House Hollywood podcast, my goal is that you leave satisfied. I don't want your takeaway after listening to this show to be, oh, I'm just like those pathetic sites regurgitating misinformation about Mötley Crüe. I am going to deliver facts. I know that they're facts if I was right there when it happened. And if there's something that I'm stating that is not a fact and it is my opinion, I'll state that it's my opinion. I even have an opinion on what I think could fix Mötley Crüe. If the band is in fact broken, or is it even fixable? After you listen to today's show, what I want you to do is go on my Facebook page, Riki Rachtman, and give your opinions on what you heard me say. So we've been standing outside on Highland Avenue long enough. I think it's time we all go inside, don't you? Yeah, I know there's a long line outside, but I can get you in front of the line. Let's get inside to episode 4 of the Cat House Hollywood podcast. The Cat House Hollywood podcast is powered by Cat House Coffee. 100% Arabica specialty coffee, roasted in small batches and shipped fresh to your door. Cat House Coffee has not been sitting on a shelf getting stale. I know that because it all comes out of my office. Cat House Coffee is fresh, and fresh coffee matters. I told you Cat House Coffee is a specialty coffee, and you can't just say any coffee is a specialty coffee. No, specialty coffee is grown at high altitudes with much care and attention from the farmer. Cat House Coffee is a small business owned and operated by myself and Leah Vendetta. It's dark roast, and it tastes amazing. Oh, by the way, it's got a lot of caffeine in it, but it never tastes bitter. It's going to be your new favorite coffee, and you can order a bag right now at cathousecoffee.com. That's cathousecoffee.com. Riki Rachtman's world-famous cat house started in 1986 as Ricky and Tammy's Cat House, and then a year later it became Riki Rachtman's world-famous cat house, which was, I think, the greatest rock and roll club in the world. Yes, we had incredible bands play secret shows, but it was the legendary, decadent, nocturnal behavior from its regulars that kept the Cat House world-famous decades after it was closed. Several years ago, I launched the Cat House Hollywood podcast, and for several months, it was a huge success. I've always been a bit of a control freak, so I wrote the Cat House Hollywood podcast. I recorded it, I edited it, I produced it, I did everything myself, including the marketing, and there never really was any marketing. Even so, at one point we had 6 episodes on the top of the iTunes charts. And like I said, I never got paid to do these shows, and eventually they stopped. But I'm bringing the show back. Of course, the show is going to be rock related. I'm going to have guests. Sometimes I'm just going to tell stories. I never want anything on this show to ever hurt anyone. When it comes to the band Mötley Crüe, I might have a reason to be a little bit bitter, but you know what? I'm not holding on to that. I've honestly let it go. Social media, it's a fucking cesspool. There is one site in particular, and I don't want to mention their names. This one site keeps on releasing ridiculous stories about Mötley Crüe, and even made a story out of something that I said, and then, of course, they find the worst picture possible to post. I don't understand why they do these things. I mean, aren't we trying to elevate you? Oh, rock and roll's dead, heavy metal's dead, which, of course, it's far from being dead, but if you keep on talking shit about it, making the participants look bad, the scene is going to die. You're supposed to elevate bands. You're supposed to elevate the scene. So this one site keeps on making stories up and putting them as headlines as clickbait. And as far as being facts, they're just not. They make up a ridiculous story, put it on the headline, and then another bottom feeder site picks it up as a news story, and they keep on putting out these rumors that later are proven false. If by some chance one of those rumors become fact, well, then they pat themselves on the back as breaking the story. The example that I keep on bringing up because they just posted something stupid about this today, it's regarding Scott Stapp from the band Creed. Their big headline is, Scott Stapp joins Mötley Crüe. They put this out like 5 months ago. And then I went on social media and I said, this is the most ridiculous story ever. If this is true and Scott Stapp becomes the singer of Mötley Crüe, I will shave my head bald. And of course, they found some really weird Photoshop picture of me and said, oh, Riki Rachtman goes on some hateful tirade. You know that I don't do hateful tirade. Or is it tirade? Whatever. I don't do those things. They're putting out this story that Scott Stapp from Creed is joining Mötley Crüe. I'm not talking shit about anybody. I'm sure the singer of Creed is a very talented singer. I have nothing against him. I also have nothing against anyone that praises God. I myself personally am very spiritual, but it is my own personal thing. Scott Stapp is a Christian rocker and has gone back to his roots of Christian rock. I do not have anything against Christian rock. I probably have more Venom records than Stryper. I don't have a Stryper record, but I'm not saying anything bad about Stryper. I don't have anything against Christian rock, and I don't have anything against Scott Stapp, and I don't have anything against Creed. Just not my thing. But to think that he would now be singing Shout at the Devil, Bastard, and 10 Seconds to Love, that is absolutely preposterous. But it was on the internet, so it's got to be true, right? Just like Nikki Sixx, all his bass lines are on tape. And Tommy doesn't really play the drums. The whole show is on tape. Well, except for Vince Neil, because we've seen the videotapes of him singing, and it doesn't sound great. Now others are chiming in on their disdain for Mötley Crüe. Bill Lewis, the singer of LA Guns, commented in an interview that Mötley Crüe, I quote, Mötley Crüe really are a fucking atrocious band. They always have been. Seems like lately it's hunting season on Mötley Crüe. Is it the band's fault? Is it deserved? Let's start with, is it the band's fault? I kind of think it is. Is it deserved? I don't know. You be the judge. I'm going to get into the whole lawsuit with former guitarist Mick Mars in a bit. But right now, I want to go back to the good old days. What I'm about to tell you from now on is fact, because this is what happened to me. Some of the stories from my early days with Mötley Crüe are featured in much better detail in my one-man show, One Foot in the Gutter, that's on tour in America in May, and then in Australia in June, and I hope to go out all over America this summer. And I tell a lot of the stories in that show. Mötley Crüe started in Los Angeles in the beginning of the 80s. I was more into punk rock at the time, especially in the late 70s, early 80s. But because I grew up miles from the Sunset Strip, I couldn't avoid seeing the band's name on posters, on telephone poles, and in the early 80s painted on the side of the club Gazzarri's, next to Great White, Van Halen, and Huey Lewis in the News. Mötley Crüe was made up of Vince Neil, Tommy Lee, Mick Mars, and the band's founder, Nikki Sixx. Nikki had been fairly known around the Hollywood scene from his previous band, London. In the movie The Dirt, doesn't it show Mötley Crüe playing their first show and nobody was there and a fight broke out or something like that? Gilby Clarke, who was in Guns N' Roses, told me that he was at the first show and it was actually pretty packed because everybody knew who Nikki was and they wanted to see Nikki's new band. In the early 80s, Mötley Crüe developed quite the following, and they were known for sex, drugs, rock and roll. None of this is news, right? In November 1981, they released their debut album, which was called Too Fast for Love, on their own label, Leather Records. Joseph Brooks, who would later become the DJ for my club Cat House and Bordello, owned a record store on Melrose called Vinyl Fetish. Joseph would let Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx take over the front window display of his record store when they were trying to release their own independent album. And they put in mannequins and blood all over it to help promote that record. Joseph told me people ended up being so offended they broke the window at the store. My first real exposure to Mötley Crüe was probably around 82, maybe. You see, my friend Keith Cooper's father was an attorney, and they lived in a nice house in the Hollywood Hills, and they had cable. And because they had cable, they had MTV, and I had never seen MTV. And one day, I saw the Mötley Crüe Livewire video, and that sparked something in me. It was something that was really cool. I ended up getting into Mötley Crüe. I'd buy the records, the T-shirts. I remember my first Mötley Crüe shirt had a skull on it, and it said, Boys in Action, 1983. I went to see them on the Theater of Pain tour. I think Loudness opened up. Back then, everybody would say, oh, Loudness, which was a heavy metal band from Japan. They call them, oh, Roudness, mocking their Japanese accents. Of course, I never did that, because if I would have done that 40 years ago, it would mean that I'm a racist and my show would be canceled and nobody would listen to me. And okay, let's stop. We're going back to the 80s, okay? I became a huge Mötley Crüe fan. And now I'm going to admit something that I'm a little bit embarrassed to say, and I never told anybody in the band or anybody this. I was like a huge Nikki Sixx fan. I'm not going to lie. I think I even dressed up as Nikki for Halloween one year. To me, it was Mötley Crüe, and every member of that band was badass because they were all four different characters, and they were all different, and they were all cool. I don't think I ever admitted the whole fandom I had for Mötley Crüe. And I'm not going to go deep into details of what happened next because it's in my show, One Foot in the Gutter, and a lot of you might have heard the story, but while I was a big fan, I got hired to be the DJ for the wedding of Tommy Lee and Heather Locklear. And then a few years after that, I ended up becoming very good friends with Nikki Sixx. I never told Nikki that I was such a fan because that would have been really weird. Eventually, I was just friends with Mötley Crüe, especially Nikki. We'd hang out a lot back in 1985, 1986. He'd come to the Cat House once in a while, and we'd have after parties at his house. That night when Nikki OD'd and was pronounced dead, well, it started by partying at the Cat House. And the next day, he called me and he told me that he had died. And later that night, he had a small get-together at his house, and we talked a lot about getting sober. I ended up introducing Nikki to one of his wives, and I was a guest at his wedding in Hawaii. At one point in the 80s, I'd bought a car from a drug dealer, and it was taken away. So Nikki sold me his Jeep really, really cheap. He was a good guy. He was a really good friend. And getting sober wasn't easy, but it helped that we were getting sober at the same time. And because they were trying to get sober, I was kind of a good guy to hang out with because I wasn't somebody that said like, hey, let's do blow, let's drink. I'll share a couple Mötley Crüe stories right now, just ones that come off the top of my head. I remember Nikki had bought a Testarossa Ferrari. And in case you don't know, that's like a stupid fast car. And Tommy also had a really fast car. I think he might have had the same thing, but I don't remember. Well, we all decided we were going to go down to Oxnard, California for a high-performance kart racing school, and Vince ended up meeting us down there. And Nikki and Tommy weren't really into it, but Vince and I, we loved racing. I remember Nikki pulling out of the parking lot in his Testarossa and stepping on the gas and spinning out. He didn't have any good car control. And he ended up leaving, and me and Vince stayed, and we raced go-karts together for the weekend. And I ended up getting in a really bad crash, and Vince Neil was the first guy to check if I was okay. And this was way before I got the job on Headbangers Ball. I mentioned Vince being there, but the truth is, most of the time, it was me and Nikki. Sometimes Tommy and Nikki would do stuff together once in a while, but not that much. And it was very rare when Nikki would do something with Vince. I remember Nikki and I going to Vince Neil's bachelor party on a boat, and we took off really, really early. We didn't even want to be there. I can't recall any time socially that anybody did anything with Mick Mars. Mick Mars never seemed to be part of the non-work Motley functions. I hung out with Mötley Crüe a lot, and Mick was rarely there. And the few times that I had conversations with Mick, they were pretty short. Mick seemed like a really good guy. We just never spoke much. He seemed to have a very dark sense of humor. I think if you look at Mick Mars, personality-wise, he's exactly as you would think he was. He just didn't talk much. He was very dark, but I don't recall anybody ever making fun of Mick or excluding him. It just seemed like some of the Motley games Mick didn't want to be a part of. One time I got to fly on Mötley Crüe's private jet to Tulsa, Oklahoma. From what I remember, it was Nikki, Tommy, Vince, and me. I don't even recall Mick being on the plane. At no time do I remember any bickering with Mick. They didn't treat him bad, didn't talk poorly of him. I know that they would be at odds with Vince quite a bit. One time, I went to Vancouver with Mötley Crüe. They were recording, I believe it was Dr. Feelgood. I remember Tommy and Nikki picking me up in a gold Rolls Royce, and we were driving around Vancouver, and there were all these young, beautiful prostitutes hanging around the streets of Vancouver. And I'm in a gold Rolls Royce with Nikki and Tommy looking at all these young prostitutes. And we had all been sober for a short time. Everybody was talking about how sad it was. Nobody was like, let's get these girls and party. It was like, no, this is kind of really sad to see these young girls. I remember that was how I knew things were really, really changing. And we went to a bar called Club Soda. Me and Nikki just went to a bar. And it was always awkward going back to bars when you're sober. But me and Nikki went to a bar, and Vince had roped off a section to make it a VIP section. And I think Vince was just in there with a couple bodyguards or something like that. And it was just Nikki and Vince were just different types of guys. Vince is like a VIP velvet rope guy. Vince is like Vegas. I mean, look, Vince lives in Vegas, and Nikki lives in, I think it's Wyoming or Montana or something like that. They're just different types of guys. But I've got nothing bad to say about Vince Neil at all. Matter of fact, when my band, yes, I was in a Sunset Strip band called Virgin. When Virgin headlined 2 nights at the Whiskey, Vince was cool enough to come on stage and do 2 songs with me. We did Thin Lizzy Jailbreak and Public Enemy #1, the old Mötley Crüe song. And if you go to one of my shows, One Foot in the Gutter, I actually have some clips of that I show. I can't say Vince and I were ever close, but he always treated me right. It did get sort of weird when the whole Axl-Vince feud started, but that's just more cat house stories that are in my show. Mötley Crüe concerts back in the day were events. I loved going when I was a fan, and I loved going when I had all access passes. I have no idea how many times I saw the Girls, Girls, Girls show or Dr. Feelgood, and the band kicked ass every night. They all sounded, looked, and moved great. Did I notice the band ever playing to tape? No. One time, I think there might have been some sweetener added to Vince's voice, but I'm not exactly sure. I know that the shows were fucking amazing. When I got the job hosting Headbangers Ball, actually, this is a little bit before I was the official host. I was sort of a man on the road. Adam Curry was still the host, but they would have me out shooting things. And my first out-of-town job for MTV was to film on location for the filming of the video Without You. Because it just showed me goofing around with Mötley Crüe, it also showed the executives at MTV that I wasn't just some reporter, journalist, or TV host. The bands were sort of my peers. They treated me like kind of the little brother you wanted to pick on all the time. Nikki and I hung out for a while. We got sober together. We went to meetings together. We shared some personal stuff. I remember one time Nikki was going through a legal battle because there was some dude that was suing Nikki Sixx, saying that he was the real Nikki Sixx. As absolutely stupid and ridiculous as it sounds, Nikki had to pay some legal fees, and it was really a pretty stressful time. So one day I'm at my club, Bordello, and my friend Landon comes up to me. Landon's sister is Charisse, who was married to Vince at the time. And Landon comes up to me to let me know that my girlfriend was just seen walking out of a hotel room in West LA, and that it was Nikki's hotel room. Of course, the relationship ended. I was never really friends with Nikki again. I did run into him one time about 15 years later, and we exchanged a few sentences, but look, I don't give a fuck who you are. You don't fuck your friend's chicks. You know, I might have thought differently if at some point over the decades he made an attempt to make amends, but from what I understand, that's not what Nikki does. And I'm not bitter after all these years, even though I know it sounds that I am, but I'm not. I really don't care. She was lame. He was lame. So I'm going to put all the personal shit aside, but it just always left me with kind of like a weird feeling about Nikki and about Mötley Crüe. Mötley Crüe with Vince, Tommy, Nikki, and Mick were what I describe as a great formula for a band. They had amazing stage show. Come on, Tommy's drum solos were legendary. Nikki always looked pretty cool too. They were four different unique characters. And you have the same thing with the original Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses, Slash is different from Axl, is different from Duff, is different from Steven, Izzy, and they were all unique individuals. And Mötley Crüe was the same way. And I also want to say that I'm not putting Mötley Crüe and Guns N' Roses in the same category. I look at Guns N' Roses the same way I would look at a band like the Rolling Stones. And that's not how I look at Mötley Crüe. I stopped going to Mötley Crüe shows. I didn't follow them at all. I still find it hard to believe that it was 1992 when Vince left Mötley Crüe and John Corabi joined. It seemed to me that it was much later than that. If we ever had them on Headbangers Ball with John, I simply don't remember it. I don't own the album with John. I've heard only a few songs, and you know what? They were good. I think John Corabi is a really talented singer, and the few times I've met him, he's a good guy. Vince ended up rejoining Mötley Crüe in 1997. And then Tommy Lee left the band and Randy Castillo joined. Randy was a phenomenal drummer, a really cool guy too. Randy was best known as the drummer for Ozzy. But Randy ended up getting really sick and eventually passed away. Then Samantha Maloney ended up joining the band as a drummer. Samantha was cool as fuck. Come on, a girl drummer to take the place for Tommy Lee? Samantha was more than capable as a drummer, having played with Hole, and I knew her from playing in an all-star jam band called the Chelsea Girls. I'm going to just sidetrack, talk about the Chelsea Girls. The Chelsea Girls would sometimes play the Roxy, and I even DJ'd at one of the parties for Chelsea Girls. Chelsea Girls were made up of my good friend Corey Parks. Corey was this badass bass player that was in the band Nashville Pussy, and she was also the flower girl in my wedding. Except for flowers, she threw white guitar picks. Chelsea Girls also had Allison from the band The Donnas and an incredible singer that we lost too early, Jill Janis. I remember Jill singing Heart's Barracuda, and just like nailing it. Sorry, I've had too much coffee. I'm going all over the place. Cat House coffee, of course. Even though Samantha and Randy were great, they weren't Tommy Lee. I like Tommy Lee as a drummer. I like watching Tommy Lee play. I think Tommy Lee has always been really cool. They came back in 2008 with Vince, Tommy, Nikki, and Mick. I didn't have any interest in the band, that band that had been so important to me, and I can't say for sure if it was Nikki's actions or if it was the music or I just moved on. But I was at the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally in which Mötley Crüe played, and I watched him, and to me, it didn't seem like there was any chemistry between the band members. It seemed like they were just going through the motions. They didn't seem like they were having fun like they used to. Of course, this is my opinion. Maybe the band was having a blast, but it didn't seem like it. And I'm not going to rehash a bunch of stuff you already know about Mötley Crüe or their Mötley Crüe performances or what happened, like when they advertised that the last show for Mötley Crüe was going to be the Staples Center in Los Angeles on December 31st, 2015. I thought it was going to be the last show. I almost thought about going, but just decided that I just didn't want to go. So I didn't. Mötley Crüe, remember, signed a contract that they would never play again, ever. A few years later, they're recording new material for the movie The Dirt, and they ceremoniously blew up the contract, meaning they would tour again. Again, it's my opinion, but I think that was the stupidest thing I ever heard. Look, we have a legally binding contract saying that we're never going to tour, but now, fuck society, anarchy, we're going to blow that contract up. You guys fucking made the contract, okay? Blowing it up, what does that mean? So the band started touring again, and I did not go to any shows. I didn't have any desire to go to any of the shows. And the band has been touring, and there's been videos all over the net showing Vince Neil not sounding good, not looking good, not being the Vince Neil that we all liked. And if Vince is listening to this show, which is a possibility, I hope he doesn't think that I'm ripping him apart, because I want more than anything for Vince Neil to be that Vince Neil that he was. Like I said, Vince was always very different from Nikki and Tommy. Vince's VIP rooms and gold Rolexes. And Nikki and Tommy, even though they liked the high life, they were maybe a little more street, maybe. Mick, however, has always been an outsider in the band. But I never heard any member of Mötley talking bad about Mick. He was just this dark, ominous member of the band. And everyone knew that Mick was getting older and getting ill. Let's start with, does Mötley Crüe need fixing? Yeah, they do. I hope that Tommy and Vince are not getting offended by this. Tommy, I don't think really needs to do anything. The band has not been getting good reviews. Everybody knows this. The band has got to know this. Even the most diehard Crüe fan will tell you that Mötley Crüe isn't sounding good. Mick said he was going to quit the band last October because his health made it impossible. John 5 was hired as a replacement. I've known John since he was a teenager. John 5 is one of the kindest, sweetest guys you will meet. John 5 is also one of the greatest guitarists out there. If you say he isn't, you are wrong. I've seen John 5 play without any effects. I've seen John 5 play the banjo. I've seen John 5 play the acoustic guitar. I put John 5 up there in the same category that I put Slash, Gary Moore, Dimebag Darrell, Eddie Van Halen, and Brian May. Yes, it is of my opinion that John 5 is that good. They put John 5 in the band because he's a nice guy, because John 5 was hanging out with Nikki, and John 5 is a damn good guitarist. I don't believe that anybody in the band did it as a marketing tool to think of how they could get a younger audience by putting John 5 in the band. I think they put him in, and I think it was a good move, actually. Now, here's where everything is getting ugly. Mick said he was retiring from touring, but not recording. So the band hires John 5 as a replacement. Mick sues Mötley Crüe, saying he should get 25% of the touring revenues, while the band thinks that Mick should get 5%. This is my opinion, people. And first, let me tell you that I'm a big Mick Mars fan. I have heard for a while that Mick Mars was putting out a solo record, and I've also heard that it's good, and I like Mick Mars. But asking for a quarter of the money when you're not even on the tour, even though he did help develop the band, I think, in my opinion, that might be a little bit excessive. After Nikki caught wind of Mick suing him, Nikki tweets, "Sad day for us, and we don't deserve this, considering how many years we've been propping him up." That's fucked up. That's fucked up. Even Stephen Pearcy from Rat commented how fucked up that is. And then it just gets even uglier. And Mick Mars makes all these claims that Tommy is on tape, that Nikki is on tape, that they've been fake playing, that a lot of stuff is pre-recorded. There's been a lot of stuff on social media that looks like it might be. I hope it's not. I was told Tommy isn't playing his drums, and that's why he's not doing those spectacular drum solos anymore. I've heard Vince's vocals, and maybe sometimes it should have been on tape. John 5 has said that Nikki plays all the bass parts on tour. I can't believe John would lie to cover up for Nikki. Do I believe that the band has some backing vocals on tape? Yes, definitely. I personally believe that, and that's my opinion. And a lot of bands do that. I don't like it. A matter of fact, I don't like anything on tape. I'd rather have flaws, but a few backing vocals would not be that astonishing. I know a lot of bands use click tracks. I fucking hate that too. I just want a band being live and raw with all their mistakes. Do I personally believe Nikki's bass would be on tape? No. It's not like he's doing some crazy Robert Trujillo bass solos. I find it very hard to believe that his bass would be on tape. And even though Tommy isn't doing those crazy drum solos anymore, I find it hard to believe that Tommy Lee's drums would be on tape. That's what people are saying. Like I said, I find it hard to believe, but it might be true. All the comments that Nikki has been making, especially about Mick, has made Nikki Sixx public enemy number one. I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know. So the question I want to ask you guys and girls listening, it's up to you. Is it too late? Are they done? Should they go away mad or just go away? I have an idea as to what I think would fix Mötley Crüe. And honestly, I hope this could happen. Would I go see him? No, probably don't think I will. First, the rumors of Scott Stapp or anyone other than Vince singing for Mötley Crüe has got to stop. If they replace one more member after John 5, they need to stop. Nikki Sixx is the only guy that's been in the band the whole time. I mean, all the other members have switched so many times. But I don't think they can replace another member of Mötley Crüe ever. If they want to play in a band, start their own band. Vince can keep doing solo, do whatever you want. So here's what I think they should do. Let's start with guitar. I think every Mötley Crüe fan loves Mick Mars. So Nikki, you guys need to work your shit out. I hear that there's talk about a new album. See if Mick wants to contribute to the album. But I think you can stick with John 5 as your guitarist on tour. Of course, Tommy and Nikki need to stay in Mötley Crüe. Vince Neil needs to get like a badass drill sergeant, personal trainer, and vocal coach. He needs to work his ass off and come back leaner and meaner. And it will not be easy. I mean, it's got to be easier than reading those reviews. The things that I'm saying about Mötley Crüe is just what everybody sees all over the cesspool of the internet. But nobody's saying Mötley Crüe sounds good, are they? Am I wrong? There was an artist a long, long time ago that had made some bad career choices. And for a time, he was thought of as a joke. But he got leaner. He got meaner. He dressed himself in tight black leather. And he did a small show with a small audience in the round, and it was awesome. It was the Elvis Presley 68 comeback special. Mötley Crüe needs to come back and play live at the Whiskey A Go-Go, or hell, I'll open the Cat House again for that night. They play live, no effects, in front of 400 people, and they get back to the basics. They have to show people they still have it. I just read this morning that they're playing the NFL draft on April 29th. Let me tell you something. They better be really damn good for that show, or they need to cancel the show. Maybe somebody's got COVID or something like that. I hope it doesn't happen, but they either better be really, really good, because it's an audition. If they look good and they sound good and it's really them, they're going to come out all right. But if they suck, I think they're done. Maybe cancel that. Find a reason to cancel the April 29th show and come back in 6 months and do a small, intimate show showing people that they can do it, that they can play their instruments. Playing their instruments is vital. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Again, this is my opinion. Now, what if Vince Neil can't get it together? And like I said, I really hope he can. I'm pulling for you, Vinny. But if he can't, okay, here's a really stupid idea. Maybe there's one guy that would be pretty cool singing for Mötley Crüe. Sebastian Bach? Have I totally lost my mind? Okay, forget it. Forget I even said it. I think it all started with the blowing up of the contract. Some people felt that they were swindled, but they still bought tickets when they played again. Now the Mick thing. Old school fans sure don't like that, especially when Nikki says stuff like they've been propping him up for years. Mick says the band plays on tape. There are endless amounts of clips of Vince Neil not singing or mumbling or not sounding good. How does it all end? Here's an idea. Vince Neil, you do a sit-down interview. Again, I think I'm the perfect choice, but maybe somebody like Dan Rather. I think Dan Rather, if you've seen the stuff that he's done on cable TV interviewing bands, he's fucking great. But I think what Vince needs to do is sit down and apologize to fans. Apologize for not being physically able to deliver the shows that Mötley Crüe fans deserve. If there was tapes involved, you guys need to come clean. You admit every damn downfall. You expose yourself and tell the fans how all you wanted to do was give each Mötley Crüe fan a great live experience. Remember that movie 8 Mile with Eminem? And during the last battle rap, Eminem came out there and said so many bad things about himself that his competitor couldn't say anything bad about him because he had already revealed all the bad things about himself. I think Mötley Crüe needs to come clean on all their downfalls. If they're playing to tape, they say we did. We fucked up. We couldn't deliver the shows. We weren't healthy, whatever it is. And you come back and do it right. Or you come clean and stop and then go do other projects. I think Nikki and John 5 probably should do something. Vince Neil, maybe he keeps on, touring, or he just stops or writes a book, a true book. Just come clean. Do that 68 comeback special of Mötley Crüe. I did a little poll on social media, and I wanted to know what your opinion was on Mötley Crüe. 23% of you said you still love them. 22% said you wanted to wait and see. And 55% of you said they are done. Is that the case? Something's got to change. I mean, by the time this is posted, who knows what's going to be out there? But it sure hasn't been nice lately, has it? I can't tell you one thing. That my show, One Foot in the Gutter, is nothing like the podcast you just heard. Have you read the reviews? It's really weird for me to talk about this show because this show, One Foot in the Gutter, is so personal. but the reviews are a must-see for any rock fan. The best spoken word show of 2023. It's very, very flattering, and I'm very, very proud of this show, One Foot in the Gutter. I get up on stage and I tell some stories in these small theaters or clubs. I've got videos, I've got photos. We go behind the scenes at the Cat House, the Headbangers Ball, but it's so much more than that. It's very personal, tales of sex, drugs, rock and roll, sleaze and debauchery. Having it all, losing it all, it's very, very personal, and it makes me feel really good that it's been getting such great reviews. I've got some shows left. I'm going to tell you the dates right now, and if I'm anywhere by you, by all means, come to the show. I promise you, you're going to have a really good time. The show is called One Foot in the Gutter. I have a show May 7th at the Ramcat in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. May 9th, I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. May 10th, Hobart, Indiana. May 11th, St. Charles, Illinois. May 12th, Chicago, Illinois. May 13th, Milwaukee at the Rave. That show is going to be rather unique because I've got some crazy stories about that place. May 17th, Asheville, North Carolina at the Gray Eagle. May 18th, I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. May 19th, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. If you want to go to this Nashville show, I'm at the City Winery. This is the smallest place that I have ever played. I think it fits like 150 people. Very, very intimate. If there are any tickets available, you need to pick them up right now. Just go to cathousehollywood.com. That's where you can get tickets to my show. And then May 20th, I'm going to be in Atlanta, Georgia at Vinyl Week, and I really want you to join me. Just go to cathousehollywood.com to find out when I'm going to be in your town. In June, I'm going to be bringing the Cat House to Australia. 4 cat houses, one night only in Australia, and then I will be on the Headbangers boat on Halloween. I hope to have my show One Foot in the Gutter all over America in the summer, and we'll just wait and see. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. I'm Riki Rachtman. Remember to keep one foot in the gutter, one fist in the gold.